What if everyone you trusted was secretly destroying you tonight? Discover how Victoria Sterling, a brilliant tech entrepreneur, lost everything to her husband's calculated betrayal. But this isn't just about betrayal. This is about a broken woman becoming something far more dangerous than her destroyers imagined. You'll witness one of the most satisfying comebacks in business history, where the perfect revenge isn't violence, but simply exposing the truth. Hit like if you're ready for this journey, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more stories that remind us we're stronger than we think. Now, let's begin with the night Victoria's world shattered. The notification lit up Victoria Sterling's phone at 3:47 in the morning. Find My Friends showed her husband Marcus at the Four Seasons Hotel downtown. Again, she sat in their empty king-sized bed, her 7-month pregnant belly making it impossible to find comfort, and stared at the blue dot that represented her crumbling marriage. Victoria had built herself into the perfect tech wife. 5 years ago, she had been the brilliant founder of Neuralink AI, a startup worth $50 million. Marcus Sterling, the golden boy of venture capital, had swept into her world with promises of love and partnership. She sold her company to his fund, married him in a ceremony featured in Forbes, and dedicated herself to supporting his empire. Now, at 32, she felt like a ghost haunting her own life. The penthouse overlooking San Francisco Bay that once thrilled her now felt like a prison. Marcus came home later each night, his designer suits carrying unfamiliar perfume, his phone buzzing with messages he never answered in her presence. The baby kicked, reminding Victoria why she had tried so hard to make this marriage work. She had convinced herself that becoming parents would heal the growing distance between them. Marcus had seemed excited about the pregnancy at first, posting carefully curated photos of her growing belly on his social media accounts. But as her due date approached, he grew more distant, more cruel in small ways that cut deep. Victoria grabbed her laptop and did what she had been avoiding for weeks. She opened Instagram and searched for the name she had heard whispered at their last charity gala Amber Cross. The influencer's profile was public, boasting 2 million followers and a lifestyle built on luxury brand partnerships. Victoria scrolled through glossy photos of designer handbags, private jets, and 5-star restaurants. Then she found it. A story posted 4 hours ago from the Four Seasons presidential suite. Champagne glasses on Egyptian cotton sheets, a man's Rolex on the nightstand, city lights glittering through floor-to-ceiling windows. The same view Victoria knew from business dinners with Marcus's clients. The betrayal hit her like a physical blow. This was not just an affair hidden in shadows. Amber was flaunting her relationship with Marcus to her millions of followers, using him for content while humiliating Victoria in the most public way possible. The comments on Amber's posts made Victoria's stomach turn. People speculated about the mystery billionaire funding Amber's lifestyle, sharing gossip and speculation that made Victoria realize she had become a laughingstock in their social circle. Victoria's hands shook as she closed the laptop. She had sacrificed everything for this marriage, her career, her independence, her identity. She had convinced herself that being Mrs. Marcus Sterling was worth giving up being Victoria Chen, the tech visionary who had revolutionized artificial intelligence interfaces. The baby kicked again, stronger this time, as if sensing her distress. Victoria placed both hands on her belly and whispered promises she wasn't sure she could keep. She would protect this child from the wreckage of her marriage. She would find a way to rebuild the life she had dismantled for a man who saw her as disposable. As dawn broke over San Francisco, Victoria Sterling realized that her perfect life had been an illusion. The woman who had once commanded boardrooms and closed million-dollar deals was about to discover whether she still had the strength to fight for her future. The war for her dignity her child, and her freedom was about to begin. But she had no idea how brutal that battle would become. Marcus returned home at 11 the next morning, his $3,000 suit wrinkled, his hair disheveled in a way that told Victoria exactly how he had spent his night. He moved through their penthouse with the casual arrogance of a man who believed himself untouchable, heading straight for the coffee maker without acknowledging his pregnant wife. Victoria had spent the sleepless hours preparing for this moment. She sat at their dining table, Amber's Instagram posts printed and arranged in front of her like evidence at a trial. The photographs documented months of her humiliation, Marcus's hand on Amber's waist at restaurants Victoria recognized, champagne toasts at hotels where Marcus claimed to be in business meetings, intimate moments that should have belonged to their marriage. "We need to talk," Victoria said, her voice steadier than she felt. Marcus looked up from his coffee, irritation flashing across his features. He was still handsome at 45, with the kind of polished confidence that photographed well for magazine covers. But Victoria saw him clearly now, perhaps for the first time in years. The charm was a performance, the success built on other people's sacrifices. "I'm late for a board meeting," Marcus said, checking his phone. "Whatever this is about can wait." "No, it cannot." Victoria gestured to the printed photos. "Explain these." Marcus glanced at the evidence of his affair and laughed. Actually laughed, as if Victoria's pain was amusing. "You're going through social media now. That's pathetic, even for you." The casual cruelty of his response took Victoria's breath away. This was the man she had loved, the father of her unborn child, dismissing her devastation as if it were an inconvenience. "I gave up everything for you," Victoria said, her voice rising. "My company, my career, my independence. And this is how you repay me." "You gave up nothing," Marcus snapped. "I bought your little startup and made you rich. I gave you a life most women would kill for. If you're too boring to keep a man's interest, that's not my problem." Victoria felt something crack inside her chest. This was not the Marcus who had courted her with grand gestures and promises of partnership. This was a stranger wearing her husband's face, speaking with a venom that revealed his true feelings about their marriage. "I'm 7 months pregnant with your child," Victoria whispered. "Are you—" Marcus set down his coffee cup with deliberate precision. "Because I remember you being very friendly with your old business partner, Jake Morrison, before we got married. Technology conferences, late-night strategy sessions, all those cozy dinners discussing artificial intelligence." The accusation hit Victoria like a slap. Marcus was questioning the paternity of their child, using her professional relationship with Jake as ammunition in their personal war. It was a new level of cruelty that left her speechless. Marcus continued his assault. "I have security footage of you meeting with Jake 3 months ago at the Ritz-Carlton. Private dining room, very intimate. So before you start making demands about my personal life, maybe you should consider how your own behavior looks." Victoria's mind raced. The meeting Marcus referenced had been completely innocent. Jake had reached out about a potential consulting opportunity, and they had discussed it over lunch. But Marcus had twisted it into something sinister, laying groundwork for future attacks on her character. "You're lying," Victoria said, but doubt crept into her voice. If Marcus had been monitoring her movements, what else had he been planning? Marcus smiled coldly. "I have very good lawyers, Victoria. Very expensive lawyers who specialize in complex divorce cases. If you want to play games, remember that you signed a prenup that gives you almost nothing if you're found to be at fault." The prenup. Victoria had signed it in a haze of love and trust, believing Marcus when he said it was just a formality. Now she realized it was a trap, carefully constructed to leave her powerless. Marcus finished his coffee and straightened his tie. I suggest you focus on being a good mother instead of playing detective. Our child deserves better than a paranoid, unstable parent. With that parting shot, he left Victoria alone at the table, surrounded by evidence of his betrayal and threats of her destruction. She sat in the silence of their empty penthouse, feeling the baby move restlessly inside her, and realized that confronting Marcus had not brought relief. It had declared war. Victoria Sterling, who had once negotiated million-dollar deals and revolutionized artificial intelligence, had just discovered that her own husband was her most dangerous adversary. The battle for her future and her child's welfare had begun, and she was already losing. But she had no idea how much worse things would get before they got better. 3 days after the confrontation, Victoria's world exploded on social media. She was tagged in hundreds of posts, her phone buzzing with notifications that made her stomach turn. Someone had leaked a video of her breakdown at the dining table, somehow captured through the penthouse's smart home system. The footage showed her crying over the printed Instagram photos, looking unstable and paranoid exactly as Marcus had predicted. The video went viral within hours. Tech blogs picked up the story of the once brilliant entrepreneur who had lost her mind over social media posts. The narrative was brutal and deliberate. Victoria Sterling, former AI prodigy, now reduced to stalking her husband's alleged mistress online while 7 months pregnant. Victoria knew immediately who had orchestrated this character assassination. Marcus had access to their home security system, the legal connections to ensure the leak appeared accidental, and the media relationships to control the story's spin. He had turned her moment of private anguish into public humiliation. Her phone rang. Jake Morrison's name appeared on the screen, and Victoria felt her first spark of hope in days. Jake had been her business partner for 3 years before she met Marcus. He understood her ambition, her intelligence. The woman she had been before marriage had diminished her into a caricature of herself. "Victoria, I saw the news," Jake said when she answered. His voice carried the warmth she remembered from their startup days. "Are you okay?" "No," Victoria admitted, her voice breaking. "I'm not okay at all. I'm flying up from Los Angeles tonight. Can we meet? I think I can help." For the first time in months, Victoria felt like someone was on her side. Jake had always seen her potential, even when she doubted herself. If anyone could help her navigate this nightmare, it would be the man who had helped her build Neuralink AI from nothing. They met the next evening at a small restaurant in Sausalito, across the bay from San Francisco. Victoria had chosen the location carefully, somewhere Marcus's social circle would never venture. Jake looked exactly as she remembered: intelligent eyes, casual confidence, the kind of man who preferred solving problems to creating them. "You look tired," Jake said gently as they settled into a corner booth. Victoria laughed bitterly. "I look destroyed. Let's be honest." "You look like someone who's been fighting for her life," Jake corrected. "That's different." Over dinner, Victoria told Jake everything. The affair with Amber, Marcus's threats about the prenup, his questioning of their child's paternity. Jake listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions that reminded Victoria why they had worked so well together. "He's setting you up," Jake said when she finished. "Everything he's doing is designed to paint you as unstable if this goes to divorce court. The video leak, the paranoia accusations, questioning the baby's paternity. He's building a case to destroy you financially and take custody of your child." "Can he do that?" Victoria asked, her hand instinctively moving to her belly. "Rich men with expensive lawyers can do almost anything," Jake said. But Marcus made one mistake. He's so focused on destroying you personally that he's not protecting himself professionally. Jake leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I've been investigating Marcus's fund for an article I'm writing about venture capital corruption. Some of his deals don't add up. Money that should be in client accounts seems to be funding his personal lifestyle. If we can prove financial impropriety, it changes everything." Victoria felt her first real hope in weeks. This was the Jake she remembered, the investigative mind that had helped them identify market opportunities and competitive advantages. If Marcus was vulnerable professionally, maybe she wasn't as powerless as she felt. "What do you need from me?" Victoria asked. "Access," Jake said. "You still have login credentials for Sterling Capital's internal systems, financial records, email communications, deal documentation. If Marcus is running his fund like his personal piggy bank, there will be evidence." "That's illegal," Victoria said automatically. "So is embezzling from investors," Jake replied. "We're not stealing anything. We're documenting potential crimes that could destroy hundreds of people's retirement funds." Victoria considered the proposal. Months ago, she never would have considered corporate espionage against her own husband. But the woman who had trusted blindly was gone, replaced by someone who understood that survival sometimes required morally complicated choices. "If we do this, I need guarantees," Victoria said. "Protection for me and my baby. Marcus can't know I'm involved until we have enough evidence to destroy him completely." Jake reached across the table and took her hand. "You have my word. I'll protect you, Victoria, the way I should have years ago." The touch sent electricity through Victoria's exhausted body. She had forgotten what it felt like to have someone care about her well-being, to be seen as more than an inconvenience or possession. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine a different future, one where she wasn't alone in fighting for her child's welfare. But as they made plans to infiltrate Marcus's business empire, Victoria didn't know that Jake Morrison had his own secrets. Secrets that would shatter her newfound hope and leave her more isolated than ever. The first betrayal was about to begin, and this time it would come from someone she trusted completely. Victoria's pregnancy had always made her an early riser, but now she woke each morning with purpose. While Marcus slept off his late nights with Amber, Victoria sat in his home office, downloading financial records and email communications from Sterling Capital's servers. Jake had taught her how to cover her digital tracks, making her access look like routine spousal oversight rather than corporate espionage. The evidence they uncovered was damning. Marcus had been using investor funds as his personal checking account, paying for luxury vacations, Amber's shopping sprees, and real estate investments that never appeared in client portfolios. The numbers were staggering: over $20 million diverted from pension funds and university endowments into Marcus's lifestyle. Jake visited the penthouse twice a week, always during Marcus's predictable business meetings. They would spread documents across the dining room table like generals planning a campaign. Victoria felt alive again, her analytical mind engaged for the first time in years. This was the partnership she had craved in her marriage, but never found. "He's been doing this for at least 3 years, Jake said, highlighting suspicious transactions. "Look at these dates. Every time he started a new relationship, his personal spending spiked dramatically." Victoria studied the patterns Jake had identified. Marcus's affair with Amber wasn't his first infidelity. The financial records revealed a trail of mistresses, each one funded through investor accounts. Her husband wasn't just unfaithful. He was a serial predator who used other people's money to finance his betrayals. "We have enough to destroy him," Victoria said, feeling a surge of satisfaction. The Securities and Exchange Commission would prosecute him. His investors would sue him into bankruptcy. He'd lose everything. "Almost everything," Jake corrected. "We need to be smart about timing. If we expose him before your divorce is final, he might try to flee the country or hide assets. We need to coordinate with law enforcement to freeze his accounts simultaneously. Victoria nodded, trusting Jake's strategic thinking. He had connections in investigative journalism and federal law enforcement from his previous exposés of corporate corruption. If anyone could orchestrate Marcus's downfall while protecting her interests, it was Jake Morrison. Their investigation sessions began lasting longer, stretching into intimate dinners where they reminisced about their startup days. Jake brought takeout from their old favorite restaurants, sharing stories that made Victoria laugh for the first time in months. He reminded her of the ambitious, confident woman she had been before Marcus convinced her to abandon her dreams. "You were fearless," Jake said one evening as they reviewed bank statements. "Remember the day you pitched to Goldman Sachs? You walked into that conference room like you owned the building." "That woman feels like someone I used to know," Victoria admitted. "I don't know how to get her back." "She's still there," Jake said softly. "She's just been sleeping. But she's waking up now. Isn't she?" Victoria felt the truth of his words. Each day of investigation made her stronger, more focused on reclaiming control of her life. The helpless victim who had cried over Instagram photos was transforming into someone who could destroy her tormentor using his own weapons against him. But their growing intimacy worried Victoria. Jake's touches lingered longer than necessary when he helped her with paperwork. His compliments carried undertones that reminded her of their chemistry before Marcus entered her life. She was vulnerable, pregnant, and desperate for affection. Jake knew exactly which emotional buttons to press. "I should have fought for you," Jake said one night as they finished organizing evidence. "When Marcus started pursuing you, I should have told you how I felt instead of stepping aside like a gentleman." "Jake," Victoria warned, but he continued, "I loved you then, Victoria. I love you now. Not because you need rescuing, but because you're brilliant and strong and deserving of someone who sees your worth." Victoria's heart raced. The confession she had secretly hoped for during their business partnership was finally happening, but the timing couldn't be worse. She was married, pregnant, and in the middle of corporate warfare with her husband. Romance was a luxury she couldn't afford. "We can't do this," Victoria said firmly. "Not now. Not while everything is so complicated." Jake nodded, but Victoria saw disappointment flash across his features. "I understand. I just needed you to know that you have options. You don't have to face this alone." As Jake gathered his papers to leave, Victoria felt a complex mix of emotions: gratitude for his support, excitement about their investigation's progress, and a dangerous flutter of possibility about their future together. For the first time since discovering Marcus's affair, she could imagine a life beyond survival. She was about to learn that hope could be the cruelest emotion of all. The call came at 6 in the morning, jarring Victoria from the first peaceful sleep she'd had in weeks. Detective Sarah Chen from the San Francisco Police Department identified herself, her voice professionally neutral but somehow ominous. "Mrs. Sterling, we need to discuss some serious allegations that have been brought to our attention regarding your recent behavior." Victoria's blood ran cold. "What allegations?" "We have evidence suggesting you've been engaging in corporate espionage against your husband's business. Unauthorized access to financial systems, theft of proprietary information, conspiracy to commit securities fraud." The words hit Victoria like physical blows. Someone had discovered their investigation, but how she and Jake had been careful, covering their digital tracks and meeting only in private. Unless... "I need to speak with my lawyer," Victoria said, her voice shaking. "That's your right, Mrs. Sterling, but I should inform you that we also have evidence of your relationship with Mr. Jake Morrison, including surveillance footage from multiple meetings at your residence while your husband was away." This investigation involves both criminal charges and potential divorce proceedings. Victoria's heart pounded so hard she could barely speak. Marcus knew everything. Somehow, he had turned their investigation against them, transforming her search for evidence into criminal conspiracy. The trap had been perfectly laid, and she had walked directly into it. After hanging up, Victoria immediately called Jake. His phone went straight to voicemail. She tried again, then again, panic rising with each unanswered ring. Finally, she drove to his hotel, only to discover he had checked out the night before with no forwarding address. Victoria sat in her car in the hotel parking lot, struggling to process what was happening. Jake had vanished exactly when she needed him most, leaving her to face criminal charges alone. Either he had been scared away by Marcus's threats, or the terrible possibility crept into her mind like poison. What if Jake's investigation had been orchestrated by Marcus from the beginning? What if her husband had used Jake to trap her into illegal activity, creating grounds for both criminal prosecution and divorce proceedings that would leave her with nothing? Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at the Ritz-Carlton Presidential Suite. Come alone. We need to talk, M." The Ritz-Carlton, the same hotel where Marcus claimed she had met Jake inappropriately. Victoria realized that every detail of their investigation had been monitored, recorded, and weaponized against her. Her husband wasn't just unfaithful. He was a master manipulator who had orchestrated her destruction with surgical precision. Victoria drove to the hotel in a daze, her pregnancy making every emotion feel amplified and dangerous. The baby seemed to sense her distress, moving restlessly as if trying to comfort her. She placed one hand on her belly and whispered promises she wasn't sure she could keep. Marcus was waiting in the suite, impeccably dressed as always, standing by floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city. He looked like a man celebrating victory, not confronting his wife about her alleged crimes. "Sit down, Victoria," Marcus said without turning around. "We have a lot to discuss." "Where's Jake?" Victoria demanded. Marcus smiled, finally facing her. "Jake Morrison is exactly where he's supposed to be. Do you really think I didn't know about your little investigation? Did you think I was stupid enough to leave evidence of financial impropriety lying around for an amateur to discover?" Victoria's mind raced, trying to process the implications. "You planted the evidence. I created a narrative," Marcus corrected. "One that shows my unstable, paranoid wife conspiring with her former lover to destroy my reputation through fabricated financial records. The story writes itself, doesn't it?" "The investor's money," Victoria said weakly, "is perfectly safe and properly accounted for." Marcus replied, "The documents you and Jake discovered were sophisticated fakes, designed to make you think you had found smoking gun evidence. Meanwhile, I have real security footage of you illegally accessing my computers, real financial records of money you transferred to Jake's accounts, real evidence of corporate conspiracy." Victoria felt the walls closing in around her. Every piece of evidence she thought would destroy Marcus had actually been bait in a trap designed to destroy her. The investigation that had made her feel powerful and purposeful had been controlled by her enemy from the beginning. "Jake was working for you," Victoria said, the full scope of her betrayal finally becoming clear. "Jake Morrison has been my employee for 6 months, Marcus confirmed. "A struggling journalist with significant gambling debts who became very cooperative when I offered to solve his financial problems. Every conversation you had with him was recorded. Every intimate moment was documented. Every illegal action you took was witnessed and verified." Victoria's knees gave out, and she collapsed into a chair. The baby kicked violently, responding to her mother's extreme distress. The man she had trusted to help her escape Marcus's control had actually been Marcus's weapon all along. "You're going to divorce me quietly," Marcus continued. "You're going to accept the minimal settlement outlined in our prenup. You're going to disappear from public life and raise our child without causing any further embarrassment to my reputation. If you fight me, I'll have you prosecuted for corporate espionage and conspiracy. You'll give birth in prison and lose custody permanently." Victoria looked up at her husband, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time in their marriage. He wasn't just unfaithful or cruel. He was a sociopath who had systematically destroyed her support systems and manipulated her into compromising positions that left her completely vulnerable. "Why?" Victoria whispered. "If you wanted a divorce, why not just ask for one?" "Because I don't like loose ends." Marcus said, "You know too much about my business operations. You have connections in the tech industry that could cause problems for my portfolio companies. This way, you're discredited, isolated, and legally compromised. No one will believe anything you say about me ever again." As Victoria sat in the hotel suite where her husband had just revealed the scope of his manipulation, she realized that every person she had trusted had betrayed her. Marcus, Jake, even her own judgment had failed her completely. She was alone, pregnant, facing criminal charges, and about to lose everything she had ever worked for. But in that moment of complete despair, something unexpected happened. Instead of breaking down, Victoria Sterling began to get angry, and anger, she was about to discover, could be far more dangerous than hope. Victoria spent the next week in a haze of legal consultations and humiliation. The criminal charges against her were dropped. Marcus's generosity in not pursuing prosecution made headlines that painted him as the forgiving husband of an unstable wife. But the damage to her reputation was catastrophic and permanent. Tech blogs that had once celebrated her innovations now published think pieces about her dramatic fall from grace. Former colleagues distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with someone accused of corporate espionage. The venture capital community, already male-dominated and unforgiving, closed ranks against her completely. Victoria's lawyer, a family court attorney recommended by Marcus's legal team, encouraged her to accept the divorce settlement without contest. The prenup would leave her with $2 million a fortune to most people, but barely enough to maintain her standard of living through her child's college years. More importantly, Marcus was demanding primary custody, claiming Victoria's mental health issues made her an unfit parent. The stress triggered early contractions at 34 weeks. Victoria was rushed to UCSF Medical Center, where doctors placed her on bed rest to prevent premature labor. She lay in the hospital bed, monitors tracking her baby's heartbeat, feeling more alone than she had ever felt in her life. Marcus visited once, bringing photographers who captured him looking concerned and supportive at his troubled wife's bedside. The images appeared in gossip magazines with headlines like "Sterling stands by his unstable wife" and "Tech mogul's loyalty despite spouse's breakdown." Even his fake sympathy was weaponized to improve his public image, while further damaging hers. "The baby's fine," Dr. Martinez told Victoria during evening rounds. "But your blood pressure is dangerously high. We're going to keep monitoring you both closely." Victoria nodded numbly. She had spent months protecting her unborn child from the stress of her failing marriage, only to discover that the stress was inescapable. Marcus's manipulation had contaminated every aspect of her life, including her pregnancy. On her third night in the hospital, Victoria's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. She almost ignored it as reporters had been trying to contact her constantly, but something made her open it. "I know you think everyone has betrayed you, but you're wrong. There are still people who see the truth. Meet me in the hospital chapel at midnight if you want to learn who your real allies are." Victoria stared at the message, her heart racing. It could be another trap, another manipulation designed to further destroy her credibility. But what did she have left to lose? Marcus had already taken her reputation, her career, her financial security, and her social connections. If this was another betrayal, at least it might end the torture of false hope. At 11:55, Victoria disconnected her monitors and made her way carefully to the hospital chapel. The space was dimly lit and empty except for a figure sitting in the back pew. As Victoria approached, the woman turned around, and Victoria gasped in recognition. Emma Rodriguez had been Victoria's senior engineer at Neuralink AI, the closest thing to a best friend Victoria had allowed herself during the intense startup years. Emma was brilliant, ambitious, and fiercely loyal, qualities that had made Victoria promote her to Chief Technology Officer before the sale to Marcus's fund. "Emma," Victoria breathed, "what are you doing here?" "Waiting for you to remember who you really are," Emma replied. She was 35 now, successful and confident in a way that reminded Victoria of her former self. "I've been watching Marcus destroy you from a distance, and I can't stay silent anymore." Victoria sank into the pew beside Emma, tears streaming down her face. "I lost everything. My career, my reputation, my marriage. I'm about to lose my child. I don't know who I am anymore." "You're Victoria fucking Chen," Emma said fiercely. "The woman who revolutionized artificial intelligence interfaces. The woman who built a $50 million company from nothing. The woman who intimidated venture capitalists and made tech billionaires nervous. That woman doesn't just disappear because some manipulative asshole tries to erase her. That woman was naive," Victoria said bitterly. "She trusted the wrong people. She gave up everything for love and got played like an amateur." "That woman made one mistake," Emma corrected. "She fell in love with a sociopath, but she's still brilliant, still innovative, still capable of extraordinary things. She just needs to remember her own power." Emma pulled out a tablet and showed Victoria a series of news articles. "Do you know what I've been doing since you sold Neuralink? I took the severance package from the sale and started my own company. Rodriguez AI is worth $2 billion now. $2 billion, Victoria, based on the foundation we built together." Victoria stared at the financial reports, struggling to process what Emma was telling her. Her former employee had become one of the most successful entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley, building an empire on technologies they had developed together. "I never forgot where those innovations came from," Emma continued. "And I never forgot that Marcus Sterling bought your company for a fraction of its true value because you were too in love to negotiate properly. He's been profiting from your intellectual property for 5 years while systematically destroying your confidence and credibility." "Why are you telling me this now?" Victoria asked. Emma's expression hardened. "Because Marcus made a mistake. He's so focused on destroying you personally that he's ignored threats to his business empire, and I've been very quietly positioning myself to acquire Sterling capital when it becomes available." Victoria's analytical mind began processing the implications. "You're planning a hostile takeover?" "I'm planning justice," Emma replied, "but I need your help. You still have intimate knowledge of Marcus's business operations. You understand his weaknesses, his fears, his strategies. Help me destroy his empire, and we'll split the proceeds. Help me save your company's technology from his incompetent management, and we'll restore your reputation in the industry." For the first time in months, Victoria felt a spark of her old self. The strategic mind that had built Neuralink was awakening, analyzing possibilities and calculating odds. Emma was offering her something Marcus never could: true partnership based on mutual respect and shared goals. "What exactly are you proposing?" Victoria asked. Emma smiled, and Victoria recognized the expression from their old brainstorming sessions. It was the look of someone who had found the perfect solution to an impossible problem. I'm proposing that we teach Marcus Sterling what happens when you try to destroy someone who's smarter, more determined, and better connected than you are. But as Victoria shook Emma's hand in the hospital chapel, neither woman realized that Marcus had anticipated this reunion. He had been monitoring Victoria's communications, tracking her movements, and preparing for exactly this moment. The trap he had set was deeper and more elaborate than either of them imagined. Emma's plan unfolded over the next month with the precision of a military campaign. While Victoria remained in the hospital on bed rest, Emma mobilized resources that made Victoria remember why she had trusted her former colleague completely. Rodriguez AI had connections throughout Silicon Valley, relationships with institutional investors, and most importantly, evidence of Marcus's systematic mismanagement of the technologies he had acquired from Victoria. Your artificial intelligence patents are being wasted, Emma explained during one of her daily visits. Marcus licensed them to his portfolio companies at far below market rates, essentially giving away innovations worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The investors who funded Neuralink's acquisition have legal grounds to sue for breach of fiduciary duty. Victoria studied the financial analyses Emma had prepared. Her former company's technology was now embedded in everything from autonomous vehicles to medical diagnostic systems, generating billions in revenue for companies that had paid Marcus pennies for access. The scale of the missed opportunity was staggering. He never understood the technology, Victoria said. He bought Neuralink for the valuation, not the innovation. He has no idea what he's been sitting on. Exactly, Emma agreed. And that ignorance is about to cost him everything. I've been quietly acquiring shares in Sterling Capital through shell companies for the past year, combined with the investor revolt we're organizing. I'll have enough votes to remove Marcus from control of his own fund. The strategy was elegant in its simplicity. Emma would trigger a shareholder uprising based on Marcus's mismanagement of Victoria's intellectual property, then offer to acquire his position at a fraction of its peak value. Victoria would be reinstated as Chief Technology Officer of her original innovations, with equity that would make her worth hundreds of millions of dollars within 5 years. What about the criminal charges? Victoria asked. The corporate espionage accusations disappear the moment Marcus loses control, Emma said confidently. Those charges were always harassment designed to keep you compliant. Once he's no longer in a position to influence prosecutors, the case falls apart due to lack of evidence. Victoria felt hope stirring for the first time since Jake's betrayal. Emma's plan addressed every aspect of Marcus's manipulation while positioning Victoria to reclaim not just her financial security, but her professional reputation and industry standing. The woman who had revolutionized artificial intelligence would return stronger than ever, but the plan depended on perfect timing. Emma needed Victoria to remain stable and compliant until the shareholder revolt was ready to launch. Any hint of their coordination would give Marcus time to prepare countermeasures that could destroy them both. I need you to play the broken wife for 2 more weeks, Emma said. Sign the divorce papers. Accept the settlement. Let Marcus think he's won completely. Then we reveal our hand and take everything from him. Victoria nodded, understanding the strategic necessity of appearing defeated. It was painful to continue the charade of helplessness, but the thought of Marcus's shock when he realized her true position made the deception worthwhile. The next week, Victoria gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him David, after her father, who had taught her that setbacks were just opportunities to demonstrate resilience. Holding her son in the hospital room, surrounded by flowers Marcus had sent for the photographers, Victoria whispered promises about the empire they would build together. Marcus visited the hospital for another carefully orchestrated photo opportunity. He held David awkwardly while cameras captured the happy family moment, his smile never reaching his eyes. Victoria played her part perfectly, looking exhausted and grateful for her husband's presence. "He's beautiful," Marcus said, loud enough for the nurses to hear. "I can't wait to raise him properly." The implied threat about custody was clear, but Victoria no longer felt intimidated. In 10 days, Marcus would discover that his broken wife had been planning his destruction with the precision he had once admired in her business presentations. Emma visited that evening after the media circus ended. "Everything's ready," she said quietly. "The investor presentations are scheduled. The shareholder votes are secured. The board meeting is set for next Friday at 10 a.m. By noon, Marcus Sterling will be unemployed." Victoria smiled, feeling truly happy for the first time since her wedding day. And then we restore your company to its proper ownership," Emma replied. "Then we show the world what happens when you try to steal credit for someone else's genius. Then we make sure Marcus Sterling never hurts another entrepreneur the way he hurt you." As Emma left the hospital, Victoria nursed her newborn son and planned their future together. She would raise David to understand the value of innovation and integrity, qualities his father had abandoned in pursuit of wealth and status. They would be partners in rebuilding the empire Marcus had tried to steal, proving that authentic talent always triumphed over manipulation. Victoria Sterling was about to learn that some victories were too perfect to be real. The trap she was walking into was deeper than any she had previously imagined. The board meeting was scheduled for Friday at 10 a.m., but by 9:30, Victoria knew something was wrong. Emma hadn't returned her calls since the previous evening, and the Rodriguez AI website was displaying a maintenance message that made Victoria's stomach clench with familiar dread. She called the Sterling Capital offices, claiming to be a journalist interested in covering the expected leadership changes. The receptionist's confused response confirmed her worst fears. "Leadership changes, I'm sorry, but there are no board meetings scheduled today. Mr. Sterling is actually celebrating the expansion of our portfolio with several major acquisitions." Victoria's hands shook as she researched Rodriguez AI online, finding news articles dated that morning about Emma Rodriguez's strategic partnership with Sterling Capital. The partnership would integrate Rodriguez AI's technologies with Marcus's portfolio companies, creating a unified artificial intelligence platform worth an estimated $5 billion. The press release included a quote from Emma that made Victoria physically ill. "Marcus Sterling has been an invaluable mentor in helping me understand how to scale innovative technologies. This partnership represents the natural evolution of ideas we've been developing together for several years." Victoria called Emma's direct line, desperate for an explanation that would make sense of what appeared to be the ultimate betrayal. Emma answered on the first ring, her voice cheerful and professional. "Victoria, I was just about to call you. Congratulations on David's birth. He's beautiful." "What is this partnership announcement?" Victoria asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. Emma's tone shifted slightly, becoming more cautious. "It's a business decision. Victoria, Rodriguez AI needed additional resources to compete at scale, and Sterling Capital offered terms that were impossible to refuse." "You said we were going to destroy him," Victoria whispered. "I said we were going to teach him a lesson," Emma corrected. "And we did. He learned to take my company seriously as a potential partner rather than a threat. Sometimes the best way to beat someone is to join them on terms that benefit you." Victoria felt the familiar sensation of walls closing in around her. "How long have you been negotiating with Marcus?" Emma's silence confirmed Victoria's worst suspicions. The rescue, the alliance, the promise of justice. All of it had been orchestrated to keep Victoria compliant while Emma negotiated her own deal with Marcus. "You were working with him from the beginning," Victoria said, the full scope of her isolation finally becoming clear. I was working for myself, Emma replied, just like you taught me to do. Marcus approached me 6 months ago about acquiring Rodriguez AI. I used your situation to get better terms. Your suffering gave me leverage to negotiate a partnership instead of an acquisition. I should thank you. Really? Victoria ended the call and sat in her hospital bed, holding her newborn son while processing the magnitude of her betrayal. Everyone she had trusted Marcus, Jake. Emma had used her vulnerabilities to advance their own interests. She had been playing a game where every other player was allied against her, making victory impossible from the beginning. The hospital room door opened, and Marcus entered with a bouquet of roses and his campaign smile. He looked like a man who had just won the lottery, which Victoria realized was exactly what had happened. Good morning, Victoria. I thought you might want to hear about some exciting business developments. Victoria stared at her husband, finally understanding the complete scope of his manipulation. You orchestrated all of it. Jake, Emma, the investigation, the rescue attempt. All of it was designed to break me down completely. Marcus set the flowers on her bedside table and sat in the visitor's chair. I orchestrated responses to your predictable behavior. You're brilliant at technology, Victoria, but terrible at understanding people. I knew you would seek allies when you felt threatened. I made sure those allies were people I could control or convert. Emma was never going to help me. Emma Rodriguez is a pragmatist who prioritizes her company's success over personal loyalty, Marcus confirmed. When I offered her a partnership worth billions instead of the revenge fantasy you were selling, she made the rational choice. Just like Jake Morrison made the rational choice to accept employment instead of gambling debts. Victoria looked down at David, sleeping peacefully in her arms. Her son would grow up believing his mother was mentally unstable, his father a successful businessman, and his family a testament to forgiveness and resilience. The narrative Marcus had constructed would become David's reality unless Victoria could find a way to expose the truth. Why didn't you just divorce me quietly? Victoria asked. Why did you need to destroy me so completely? Because you're dangerous. Marcus said simply, You're intelligent enough to cause problems for my business operations if you ever decided to investigate them seriously. You have connections in the technology industry that could damage my portfolio companies if you chose to use them vindictively. This way, you're discredited, isolated, and legally compromised. Nobody will believe anything you say about me, and nobody will want to associate with you professionally. Marcus stood and straightened his suit jacket. The divorce papers are finalized. You'll receive $2 million and supervised visitation with David pending psychological evaluation. I suggest you use the money to get treatment for your obvious mental health issues. And if I fight you, with what resources? Marcus asked. With what allies? With what credibility you've been declared mentally unstable by medical professionals, accused of corporate espionage by law enforcement, and betrayed by everyone you trusted. Fighting me would only prove that you're as paranoid and delusional as everyone already believes. As Marcus left the hospital room, Victoria understood that she had been systematically stripped of every tool she might have used to defend herself or her child. Money, reputation, professional connections, personal relationships, legal standing all had been neutralized through Marcus's patient, methodical campaign of destruction. Victoria Sterling, who had once commanded respect in boardrooms across Silicon Valley, was now completely powerless. But as she held her son and whispered promises she wasn't sure she could keep, Victoria began to understand that sometimes power had to be rebuilt from nothing. Sometimes the only way to win was to change the game entirely. 6 months after David's birth, Victoria Sterling disappeared from public view entirely. The tech blogs that had once dissected her downfall moved on to other scandals, leaving her to fade into the anonymity she had once feared. But Victoria wasn't hiding, she was preparing. She used her divorce settlement strategically, renting a modest apartment in Oakland and living far below her means while investing every spare dollar in a plan Marcus would never anticipate. She couldn't compete with him in venture capital or corporate warfare, but she could outmaneuver him in the one arena where her expertise was unquestionable artificial intelligence, working 18-hour days while David napped. Victoria began developing a revolutionary neural interface technology that made her original Neuralink innovations look primitive. She called it CogniLink, and it represented 5 years of advancement beyond anything currently in the market. More importantly, she designed it to be completely incompatible with the systems Marcus was licensing to his portfolio companies. Victoria's breakthrough came from an unexpected source, the psychological trauma she had endured. Her intimate understanding of manipulation, betrayal, and emotional warfare gave her unique insights into human cognitive patterns that most technologists missed. CogniLink didn't just interface with human thoughts, it could detect deception, emotional manipulation, and psychological coercion with unprecedented accuracy. The implications were staggering. CogniLink could revolutionize everything from criminal justice to corporate negotiations, offering objective measurement of human honesty and emotional authenticity. It was exactly the kind of paradigm-shifting innovation that made Marcus's existing technologies obsolete overnight. But Victoria needed funding, and every traditional investor was either connected to Marcus or unwilling to risk association with her tainted reputation. She would have to find resources outside the established system, which meant taking risks that could destroy her second chance entirely. Victoria's solution came through an unexpected channel the women's technology community she had ignored during her marriage to Marcus. Dr. Sarah Kim, a neuroscientist at UCSF, had been following Victoria's original work for years and reached out after reading about the divorce scandal. "I don't care about your personal drama," Sarah said during their first meeting. "I care about the fact that you're the only person who truly understands the intersection of artificial intelligence and human cognition. If you're serious about starting over, I know investors who care more about innovation than gossip." Sarah introduced Victoria to a network of female entrepreneurs, scientists, and executives who had built their careers outside Marcus's sphere of influence. These women had their own funding sources, their own media connections, and their own reasons for wanting to see traditional power structures disrupted. Within 3 months, Victoria had raised $20 million in seed funding from investors who saw CogniLink's potential and believed in her ability to execute the vision. More importantly, she had found allies who understood that her conflict with Marcus was about more than personal revenge. It was about preventing manipulative sociopaths from controlling transformative technologies. Victoria's team worked in stealth mode for 8 months, developing CogniLink in a converted warehouse space that looked nothing like the gleaming offices she had once occupied. The environment was scrappy and intense, filled with brilliant minds who had been overlooked or underestimated by the traditional tech establishment. Dr. Kim led the neuroscience research while Victoria focused on the artificial intelligence algorithms. They recruited programmers and engineers who had been passed over by Marcus's companies, building a team united by shared purpose rather than financial incentives alone. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday evening in March, when CogniLink successfully detected emotional manipulation in real time during a controlled experiment. Victoria watched the data streams on her monitors and realized she had created something that could fundamentally change human communication. "It works," Sarah said, staring at the test results. "It actually works. We can measure deception, emotional manipulation, psychological coercion, all of it." Victoria smiled, feeling a satisfaction she hadn't experienced since her original startup days. "Now we need to demonstrate it in a way that gets the world's attention." "What are you thinking?" Sarah asked. Victoria's expression hardened with determination. I'm thinking it's time for Marcus Sterling to face a technology that can expose exactly what kind of man he really is, in front of the whole world. The plan Victoria outlined was audacious, risky, and guaranteed to either restore her reputation completely or destroy her second chance forever. But Victoria Sterling was no longer the naive entrepreneur who had trusted blindly. She was a mother fighting for her child's future, a scientist protecting her innovations from theft, and a woman determined to prove that authentic genius would always triumph over manipulation. Marcus Sterling was about to discover that destroying someone's life didn't guarantee they would stay destroyed. Sometimes it just made them more dangerous. The TechCrunch Disrupt conference in San Francisco was the perfect stage for Victoria's comeback. Marcus would be there as a keynote speaker, discussing the future of artificial intelligence investment. He had no idea that his ex-wife was scheduled for a demo presentation in the same venue, or that her technology would expose him as a fraud in front of the entire industry. Victoria stood backstage, wearing a simple black dress that projected competence rather than glamour. David was with the babysitter, safe and unaware that his mother was about to risk everything on a single demonstration. If this failed, Victoria would lose her investors, her team, and her last chance at redemption. Dr. Kim squeezed her shoulder. The equipment is calibrated perfectly. Cognilink will work exactly as designed. Are you ready for this? Victoria nodded, feeling the familiar pre-presentation adrenaline that had carried her through countless startup pitches. I've been ready for this since the day he tried to destroy me. Marcus's keynote was predictably polished, full of buzzwords about artificial intelligence's potential to transform human society. He stood at the podium like a tech visionary, describing innovations he had purchased rather than created, claiming credit for breakthroughs that belonged to the entrepreneurs he had manipulated. When Victoria took the stage for her demo, she could see Marcus in the VIP section, his face registering shock at her presence. He had assumed she was broken beyond repair, incapable of mounting a professional comeback. His surprise was the first victory in a battle that would determine both their futures. Good afternoon, Victoria began, her voice carrying across the packed auditorium. My name is Victoria Sterling, and I'm here to demonstrate Cognilink, a neural interface technology that can detect deception and emotional manipulation in real time. The audience murmured with interest. Victoria had their attention, but she needed their belief. Cognilink represents 5 years of advancement beyond current artificial intelligence interfaces. It doesn't just read human thoughts, it analyzes the authenticity of human communication. Victoria gestured to the demonstration setup. I'm going to test this technology live, using volunteers from the audience to prove that Cognilink can identify when someone is lying, manipulating, or attempting to deceive others. Several hands shot up, including Marcus's business partner Richard Hayes, who had orchestrated much of the financial manipulation Victoria had discovered months earlier. Perfect. Mr. Hayes, Victoria called, would you join me on stage? Hayes approached confidently, believing this was an opportunity to discredit Victoria's technology. He sat in the chair connected to Cognilink's sensors while Victoria explained the process to the audience. I'm going to ask Mr. Hayes several questions, Victoria announced. Cognilink will analyze his responses for deception, emotional manipulation, and psychological coercion. The results will be displayed in real time for everyone to see. Victoria's first questions were innocuous, establishing baseline readings while Hayes relaxed into what he assumed was a friendly demonstration. Then she began probing Sterling Capital's business practices, asking about investor returns, portfolio company management, and financial transparency. Cognilink's displays lit up like Christmas trees, showing deception indicators that were impossible to ignore. Hayes's confident answers were revealed as elaborate lies, his reassuring tone identified as emotional manipulation, his professional demeanor exposed as psychological performance. The audience watched in fascination as Victoria systematically dismantled Hayes' credibility using objective technological analysis. But the real shock came when she connected to a database of Sterling Capital's financial records that Emma Rodriguez had unknowingly provided access to during their fake alliance. Cognilink can also analyze written communications for deception patterns, Victoria announced, displaying emails and financial documents on the auditorium's screens. These are internal Sterling Capital communications showing systematic investor fraud, misappropriation of funds, and deliberate misrepresentation of portfolio company performance. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Marcus's empire hadn't just been built on stolen innovations, it had been sustained through investor fraud that had cost pension funds and university endowments hundreds of millions of dollars. The scale of his crimes made headlines even before Victoria finished her presentation. Marcus tried to leave the auditorium, but FBI agents were waiting in the lobby. Victoria had coordinated with federal investigators, providing them with evidence while ensuring the public exposure would prevent any attempts to suppress the case through legal maneuvering. As Marcus was led away in handcuffs, Victoria concluded her demonstration. Cognilink represents more than just technological advancement. It represents accountability. In a world where manipulation and deception have become epidemic, we finally have tools to identify and expose the truth. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Investment offers poured in before Victoria left the stage. Media requests filled her phone with opportunities to tell her story on her own terms. But the real victory came 3 months later, when Victoria won full custody of David after Cognilink analysis proved Marcus's history of systematic psychological manipulation. Her son would grow up knowing that his mother had built empires, not just survived their destruction. Victoria Sterling had learned that some battles couldn't be won through traditional means. Sometimes justice required changing the rules entirely, using innovation to expose corruption that thrived in darkness. Marcus Sterling was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for investor fraud. His empire was dissolved. His stolen innovations returned to their rightful creators. His reputation destroyed as completely as he had tried to destroy Victoria's. And Victoria. She built Cognilink into a $10 billion company that revolutionized human communication, raised her son to value integrity over wealth, and proved that authentic genius could overcome any manipulation. After a night with his mistress, Marcus Sterling had handed his wife divorce papers at breakfast. By dinner, he had lost everything that mattered. Sometimes the perfect revenge is simply living well enough to expose the truth.